After my grandparents died in a crash, the lawyer revealed I was sole heir to their $25 million fortune. My family demanded I hand it over, but I refused. That night, they kicked me out. I moved into my grandparents' home. Next day, they came to evict me, but froze when they saw who stood at my side. Their faces went pale. I grew up in a family where I was always the one left out. You know that invisible chair at the table nobody saves for you? That was me. My parents, my uncles, my cousins, they all had this tight circle of competition and greed. If you weren't pushing, grabbing, or proving your worth, you were nothing. And I wasn't like them. I never cared about money, status, or being the favorite, which is probably why they never cared much for me. The only people who did were my grandparents. They lived in this big, old house just outside town, surrounded by oak trees and a wraparound porch that smelled of cedar in the rain. Every Sunday, when the rest of my family gathered only to argue about business, politics, or who was more successful, I would sneak away to sit with them. My grandmother would tell me stories about when she and my grandfather first met, how they built everything from nothing. My grandfather would nod and add his usual line. Hard work means nothing if you don't have heart. That house felt like safety. I could breathe there. They never judged me, never made me feel small. They just wanted me to listen, to learn, and to grow into someone decent. Looking back, maybe they already knew what kind of wolves the rest of the family were turning into. When the call came that they'd been in a car accident, my world stopped. The details blurred together. Sirens, hospital corridors, the cold weight of finality when the doctor shook his head. I remember standing outside the hospital entrance, watching other families rush past me, laughing, arguing, living their lives. Mine felt like it had just collapsed into silence. I thought, at the very least, their death would make my family pause. That for one moment, grief would cut through the endless obsession with money and appearances. I thought we'd stand together in respect. But even at the funeral, I caught glimpses of whispers, my uncle leaning in to another relative, calculating something behind narrowed eyes. I told myself I was paranoid. I wanted to believe this time, maybe, we'd all be human. It wasn't until the lawyer called us in for the reading of the will that the truth started to show. Sitting there in that polished office, the heavy smell of leather chairs and stale coffee, I felt like a kid again, like I didn't belong. Everyone else leaned forward, waiting, hungry. I sat back, arms crossed, just trying to hold on to the last fragments of grief. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, read through the standard lines, and then cleared his throat before the part that would change everything. And in that room full of people who had ignored me my whole life, I had no idea that I was about to become the center of their rage. The lawyer's office was colder than I remembered. Maybe it was just me. Maybe it was the way everyone else leaned forward in their chairs, practically salivating. My aunt had brought a notepad, like she was ready to divide up furniture before the ink dried. My father's jaw was tight, his eyes flicking between me and the lawyer, like he already knew something was off. I sat near the end of the long conference table, the outsider's seat. I wasn't expecting anything. Honestly, I figured they'd leave me a photo album or maybe the pocket watch my grandfather used to wind every morning at breakfast. Something sentimental, something real. Because that's what they'd always given me. Time, warmth, stories. The lawyer cleared his throat and shuffled papers. For the last will and testament of Mr. and Mrs. Cole. Everyone held their breath. My mother's hand gripped the armrest so hard her knuckles turned white. The estate, liquid assets, and holdings, totaling $25.3 million, are to be transferred in entirety to their grandson. He said my name. My name. The silence hit harder than the words. For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. But then I saw their faces. My uncle's mouth dropped open. My aunt blinked like she was short-circuiting. And my father, my own father, whipped his head toward me so fast I thought he'd snap his neck. No, my cousin barked, shaking his head. No way. That's not possible. The lawyer, calm as ever, repeated it. My name. The amount. Sole heir. And that's when the shouting started. This is ridiculous, my aunt snapped. They wouldn't cut out their own children. He's a child. He doesn't know what to do with that kind of money. He manipulated them, someone else hissed. He was always over there, whispering in their ears. Don't think we didn't notice. I sat frozen, my hands gripping the edge of my chair. Manipulated them? I hadn't asked for this. I would have given it all back in a heartbeat just to have them alive again. But I couldn't say that. My throat was locked. My father leaned across the table, eyes burning into me. "You're going to sign it over," he said, voice low but deadly clear. "All of it. You can't possibly believe this belongs to you." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. The lawyer interjected, "The will is airtight. It was updated just 6 months ago with full legal review. Unless contested through lengthy litigation, the estate is." "Contested?" "Oh, it will be contested," my uncle snapped. His face was red, veins pulsing at his temple. The room was boiling. Fingers pointed. My mother was crying, but not from grief. Her tears were bitter, angry. My cousin slammed his fist against the table. The lawyer tried to calm everyone, but it was like trying to put out a house fire with a glass of water. And me? I just sat there, heart pounding in my ears. I wasn't happy. I wasn't smug. I was terrified. Because in that instant, I understood. This wasn't an inheritance. It was a target painted on my back. The shouting kept building, overlapping voices accusing, demanding, condemning. My name was spit out like it was poison. And all I could think was how my grandparents would have hated this. How the family they tried so hard to hold together was tearing itself apart over numbers on a page. The lawyer's voice barely cut through the chaos. "Please, everyone, this isn't the place." But my father leaned back, eyes still locked on me, and said just loud enough for me to hear, "You have no idea what you've just walked into." And that night, I learned exactly what he meant. That night, the house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a battlefield waiting for the next shot to be fired. We sat around the dining room table, the same one where birthdays and Christmas dinners had once been celebrated, but the atmosphere was suffocating. Nobody prayed. Nobody ate. Nobody even mentioned my grandparents. Instead, the conversation circled like vultures. My aunt leaned forward, her voice syrupy sweet. "Honey, you know you can't possibly handle this kind of responsibility. 25 million? It's overwhelming for anyone, let alone you." My cousin chimed in. "Exactly. The taxes alone could bury you. You'd be better off letting Dad handle it. He knows about investments. Business, you'll thank us later." I tried to keep my face neutral, but my stomach twisted. They weren't wrong about taxes or complexity, but I also knew what handle it meant. It meant handing over every decision, every cent, and being left with scraps. If that. My father finally spoke, his tone calm in a way that felt more dangerous than shouting. "All you need to do is sign a power of attorney. Simple, clean. You'll still be in the picture, of course, but the family will manage the estate responsibly." The word, responsibly, landed like a stone. This was the same man who used to blow paychecks at the casino and then rage when my mom questioned him. The same uncle who had gone bankrupt twice because of big opportunities. These people didn't know the meaning of responsible. I swallowed hard. I don't think that's what Grandma and Grandpa wanted." The room went still. My father's eyes sharpened, and for a second, I thought he might lunge across the table. Instead, my cousin barked out a laugh. "Listen to him. Suddenly, he's an expert on what they wanted. You think they meant for you to hoard it all while we get nothing?" My aunt reached for my hand, but it wasn't affection, it was pressure. Her nails dug into my skin as she whispered, "Don't be stupid. Sign it now before this gets ugly." And then I heard it. A slip. My uncle muttered under his breath, not quietly enough. "Once it's in my name, we can cut him out clean." Cut me out clean. My chest tightened. My ears rang. I stared at the table, at the faint scratches from years of family meals, and suddenly I realized they weren't just asking. They were planning. I wasn't family anymore. I was an obstacle. I pushed my chair back, the legs screeching against the floor. "I need some air," I muttered, and left the room before anyone could stop me. In the hallway, I pressed my back against the wall, trying to breathe. Their voices carried through the door, angry, hushed, but clear enough to know they were already dividing things up. My name floated in the mix, paired with words like problem, fix, and out. Maybe at another time, I would have convinced myself I was overreacting. That paranoia was clouding my grief. But not this time. I knew what I'd heard. And in that moment, I understood something terrifying. This wasn't about family anymore. This was war, and I had just been cast as the enemy. And later that night, they proved it. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, every creak of the old house making my heart pound harder. The words kept replaying in my head, "Cut him out clean." It didn't sound like a slip. It sounded like a plan. Around midnight, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy, deliberate. The door creaked open, and in the dim light, I saw my father framed in the doorway. His silhouette was enough to make me sit up, heart thudding in my chest. "We need to talk," he said flatly. No emotion, no grief, just business. He came in and shut the door behind him. In his hand was a folder, thick, with papers spilling out. He dropped it onto the coffee table. "Power of attorney. It's done. All you have to do is sign." I glanced down at the papers, the legalese blurring in my tired eyes. My name was typed at the top, followed by words I didn't even understand fully. But one thing was clear. Once I signed, I'd be handing everything to him. My throat tightened. I don't think this is right." He crouched down, so we were eye level. His face was calm, but his eyes burned. "Listen to me. You're not built for this. You've never managed anything bigger than your part-time job. You'll drown in it. Let me take the burden off you." I shook my head, barely whispering. "Grandpa and Grandma, they chose me." The calm cracked. His jaw tightened, and his hand slammed against the arm of the couch, inches from my leg. I jumped. They were old, confused, manipulated. Don't make the mistake of believing this was their final wish. My hands were shaking. I wanted to scream, to push him away, but the words stuck in my throat. "I won't sign," I forced out. For a moment, he just stared at me. Then he stood, towering, his shadow stretching long across the wall. He grabbed the folder, shoved the papers back inside, and muttered, "Then you're out. Don't expect a bed under this roof anymore." By morning, his words became reality. I woke to find my bags packed and set by the front door. My aunt stood guard, arms crossed, lips pursed like she was proud of herself. My mother wouldn't even meet my eyes. My cousin smirked as he sipped coffee, like this was some kind of victory lap. "Keys," my father said. His hand was outstretched. I looked down at the small set dangling from my fingers. The keys I'd used to open this door since I was a kid. The same ones that had always made me feel like I had some place here. Now, they burned in my palm. Slowly, I dropped them into his hand. He didn't thank me. He didn't say goodbye. He just turned his back. I picked up my bags, stepped outside, and felt the weight of the door slam behind me. The sound was final, like a judge's gavel. The cold night air hit me, sharp and heavy. I walked down the driveway with shaking legs, my mind screaming with everything I hadn't said, every ounce of anger I'd swallowed. But as I reached the end of the street, one thought cut through the noise. I still had the keys to my grandparents' house. The one place no one could push me out of. By sunrise, I was standing at the porch of that house, staring at the familiar windows, the paint weathered but strong. I slid the key into the lock, and for the first time since the crash, I felt something close to relief. The door creaked open, and the smell hit me instantly. Cedar, faint lavender, the lingering presence of them. It was like walking into their arms. I dropped my bags in the hall, sank onto the couch, and let out a long, shaking breath. But even as I sat there, safe for the moment, I knew this wasn't over. The fight had only just begun, and what I found inside that house made me realize how unprepared I really was. The first morning in my grandparents' house was quiet, too quiet. I woke on the old couch in the living room, wrapped in a blanket that still smelled faintly of my grandmother's lavender detergent. For a moment, I could almost trick myself into believing she was just in the kitchen, humming while making tea. But then the silence settled in again, heavy and undeniable. I walked through the rooms, letting my hand trail along the furniture, every detail a memory. The framed family photos on the mantel, the worn rug in the study, the grandfather clock that ticked a second slower than it should have. This place wasn't just a house, it was a history. And now, somehow, it was all mine. That realization should have felt comforting. Instead, it was terrifying, because I knew the others wouldn't stop. They saw 25 million reasons to come after me, and they wouldn't rest until they got them. I decided to check the study, a room my grandfather had practically lived in. Papers were stacked neatly, files labeled in his precise handwriting. It was strange, he'd always been meticulous, but now it felt like he'd prepared these files for me. I opened the top drawer of his desk and found a sealed envelope with my name written in his unmistakable cursive. My throat tightened as I tore it open. Inside was a letter. "Don't be afraid of what we've left you. We trusted you because you never asked for anything, and you never let greed guide your heart. Protect what is yours, because it is not just money, it is the legacy of our lives. And remember, we made sure you would not stand alone." Tears blurred my vision, but I kept reading. Along with the letter was a business card. Daniel Harris, attorney at law. A note was scribbled underneath. A friend you can trust. He knows everything. I sank back in the chair, clutching the letter, my pulse racing. They had planned this. They had seen through the family's hunger long before I did. And they had chosen me not because I was the strongest, but because I was the only one who wouldn't betray their values. Then I noticed another file in the drawer, marked Holdings. When I flipped it open, my jaw dropped. The accounts listed didn't just add up to 25 million. There were trusts, offshore investments, properties I hadn't even known existed. The real estate portfolio alone was worth more than I'd imagined. My grandparents hadn't just left me wealth, they had left me power. But with power came weight. My hands trembled as I tried to process it. The family thought they were fighting over one fortune. They didn't even know half of it. And if they ever found out. I closed the file and shoved it back into the drawer. My breathing was shallow. This was so much bigger than I thought. I wasn't just the heir. I was the gatekeeper of a legacy that could reshape all of our lives. The sound of gravel crunching outside snapped me back. I froze, listening. A car door slammed shut. Voices, too many, too loud. My chest tightened. They were here. Already. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just defending a house. I was defending everything they had built, and I wasn't sure I could do it alone. I sat in the study with the letter still in my hand, the words of my grandfather burning into me. Don't be afraid of what we've left you. Protect what is yours. Outside, I could hear the faint sound of a car engine cooling, the muffled chatter of voices that didn't belong here. My family hadn't even given me 24 hours. They were circling already. I pressed my palms into my face, breathing hard. Part of me wanted to give in, sign whatever they shoved in front of me, let them tear each other apart over the money while I walked away free. Maybe then I could grieve in peace. Maybe then the weight on my chest would lift. But then another thought crept in. If I gave it up, I wouldn't just be giving away money. I'd be betraying the trust my grandparents had put in me. They hadn't chosen me because I was the smartest, or the toughest, or the most experienced. They'd chosen me because they knew I wouldn't sell out their legacy. I looked around the room. The desk, the clock, the faded photographs on the wall. This wasn't just property. This was proof of a lifetime of sacrifices, a lifetime of building something from nothing. And they'd trusted me to carry it forward. I clenched the letter in my fist, my jaw tightening. No, I whispered to the empty room. I won't give them a cent. For the first time since the will reading, I felt a spark of certainty. It wasn't relief, not yet, but it was a decision. I wasn't going to bend. Not this time. And as the voices outside grew louder, closer to the front porch, I realized my choice was about to be tested. Because when they came knocking, they weren't asking anymore. They were demanding. The pounding on the front door shook the whole frame. I froze in the study, heart slamming against my ribs, the letter still crumpled in my fist. Voices rose outside, angry, impatient, echoing across the porch. Open up, my uncle bellowed. You don't belong in there. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stand. My legs felt like lead as I walked through the hallway toward the door. Each step made the wood creak beneath me, and I wondered if my grandparents had ever imagined this house would become a fortress instead of a home. The banging grew louder. We know you're in there, my cousin shouted. This isn't yours. Don't make it worse for yourself. I reached the door, hand hovering over the knob. My first instinct was to stay quiet, to pretend I wasn't home. But then I remembered the letter, my grandfather's words. Protect what is yours. If I didn't make a stand now, I never would. I pulled the door open. They stood in a tight cluster on the porch, my father, my aunt, my uncle, and two of my cousins. Their faces were hard, their eyes blazing. For a second, nobody spoke. They just stared at me like I was prey that had dared to bare its teeth. My father stepped forward. Give me the keys. Hand over the documents. This isn't your fight. I forced my voice to stay steady. It is my fight. This is my home now. And you don't get to decide otherwise. A laugh broke out, short, mocking, from my cousin. You think you can hold this place against all of us? You're nothing. You'll fold. But I didn't. My hands were trembling, but I didn't move aside. I stood there in the doorway, blocking them. Grandma and Grandpa made their choice. You don't have to like it, but it's done. I'm not signing anything. I'm not handing over a thing. And if you think you can scare me out of here, you're wrong. For a moment, the air was electric. My aunt's mouth opened, closed, then opened again, like she couldn't process that I had actually spoken back. My father's face darkened, jaw clenched so tight I thought he might break a tooth. "You'll regret this," he said finally, his voice low and venomous. I held his gaze, my palms slick with sweat, but my spine straight. Maybe, but I'd regret giving up even more. Silence. Heavy, simmering silence. And then, one by one, they stepped back. My uncle muttered something under his breath, my cousin spat on the porch boards, and my father gave me one last burning look before they turned and walked toward their cars. The engines roared to life, gravel crunching as they pulled away. When the sound faded, I closed the door and locked it, my whole body trembling. I leaned against the wall, heart racing, adrenaline burning through me. For the first time, I hadn't let them steamroll me. For the first time, I had drawn a line. But as the silence settled back over the house, another thought crept in. They weren't done. They'd only just started, and I was about to find out exactly how far they were willing to go. The next few days passed in a strange kind of quiet. No pounding on the door. No angry phone calls. No sudden confrontations in the driveway. Just silence. At first, I didn't trust it. I kept expecting headlights to sweep across the windows at night, or voices to rise on the porch again. But nothing came. By the third day, I started to think maybe they had finally accepted reality. Maybe the shock of the will had burned itself out. I told myself they were too busy fighting among themselves to keep coming after me. The thought brought a fragile sense of relief, like the first breath after holding it underwater too long. I tried to settle into the house. I cooked in my grandmother's kitchen, the smell of garlic and onions filling the air. I spent hours walking through the rooms, taking stock of everything. Every photo, every keepsake, every file my grandfather had meticulously organized. For the first time in weeks, I felt something like normalcy creeping back in. I even started to believe it was over, that maybe the storm had passed. But late one night, as I sat in the study flipping through the ledger of properties my grandparents had owned, my phone buzzed with a notification. Unknown number. Just one sentence. "Enjoy playing heir. We'll be back soon." The relief shattered like glass. Because the calm I thought I'd found wasn't safety at all. It was just the eye of the storm. The message on my phone kept replaying in my head like a siren. "Enjoy playing heir. We'll be back soon." I tried to brush it off, tried to convince myself it was an empty threat, but I couldn't shake the dread coiling in my stomach. And sure enough, 2 mornings later, they came back. This time, not with fists or shouting, but with something far worse. Lawyers. I heard the cars before I saw them. Tires on gravel, doors slamming, voices echoing across the front lawn. When I pulled back the curtain, my heart dropped. My father, my uncle, and my cousin were there again. But now, standing beside them, were 2 men in sharp suits, briefcases in hand. They weren't here to scream. They were here to dismantle me legally. I opened the door before they could knock, my chest tight, but my face as steady as I could manage. My father smirked. "You've had your little fantasy. Now it's time to wake up. We're filing a petition to challenge the will. Undue influence. Mental incompetence. Fraud. Take your pick. By the time this is over, you'll wish you signed when you had the chance." One of the lawyers stepped forward, his tone polished but cold. "Mr. Cole, my clients are contesting the validity of your inheritance. Unless you agree to a settlement, this matter will be taken to court immediately. It could take years. Costly years." The words hit me like ice water. Settlement. That meant they wanted me to cave now, to hand over a portion before it ever reached a judge. I clenched my fists, trying to steady my voice. "The will is airtight. The lawyer who read it said so." My uncle laughed bitterly. "Lawyers can be bought. Don't be naive." And then, like a lifeline, I remembered the letter from my grandfather. "We made sure you would not stand alone." I took a step back, heart racing, and grabbed the business card from the desk inside. My hands shook as I dialed the number. A man answered on the second ring, his voice calm and sure. "Daniel Harris speaking." I barely got the words out, but he understood immediately. "They're there, aren't they?" he asked. "Yes," I whispered. "They brought lawyers." "Good," he said simply. "Let them wait. I'll be there in 20 minutes." I hung up and returned to the door. My father was watching me, suspicious. "Who was that?" I didn't answer. I just said, "If you're filing something, then file it. But you're not stepping foot inside this house." The silence between us stretched like a taut wire. For a moment, I thought he might try to push past me. But then the roar of another engine broke through. A black sedan pulled into the driveway, and a tall man in a tailored suit stepped out, a leather briefcase in hand. His presence was calm, almost casual, but the way he carried himself radiated authority. Daniel Harris, my grandparents' ally. My ally. When he reached the porch, he gave me a reassuring nod before turning to face my family and their lawyers. Gentlemen, he said smoothly, I represent the estate of Mr. and Mrs. Cole, and by extension, their sole heir. I've reviewed the documents personally. The will is bulletproof. Any attempt to contest it will not only fail, but expose a paper trail your clients would rather stay buried. My uncle stiffened. My cousin's smirk faltered. The two lawyers exchanged uneasy glances. Daniel continued, his tone sharp now. Financial records, debts, misappropriations. Shall I go on? Because if you want this to go to court, I will happily present every skeleton in your closets to a judge. My father's face drained of color. My aunt's lips parted in shock. For once, they had no words. I stood there, silent but stronger than I'd ever felt, watching their confidence collapse. The porch, once their stage of intimidation, had become their reckoning. And in that moment, seeing their faces pale, I realized this war wasn't over, but the balance of power had just shifted in my favor. For a brief second, after Daniel stood on that porch and dismantled their threats, I thought maybe it was over. The way their faces drained of color, the way their confidence cracked, it felt like victory. But victories, I was learning, don't last long in a family like mine. 3 weeks later, the papers arrived. Thick envelopes stamped with court seals, delivered right to the front gate. My father, my uncle, my cousins, they had filed the lawsuit anyway. Contesting the will wasn't just a threat. It was real, official, and staring me in the face. Daniel flipped through the documents at the kitchen table while I sat across from him, my stomach in knots. They're going all in, he muttered. Undue influence, mental incompetence, even claiming your grandparents weren't of sound mind when they signed. The words blurred in my head. Court dates, affidavits, depositions. A whole legal war. I couldn't imagine sitting in front of a judge, defending myself against my own family. I rubbed my eyes, exhausted. I can't do this. I don't want to do this. Why couldn't they just leave it alone? Daniel leaned back, his expression calm but firm. Because they've never seen you as someone who could stand up to them. They think if they drag this out long enough, you'll break. That's the strategy, bleed you dry with pressure until you fold. He was right. The next few weeks felt like drowning. Every day brought another notice, another demand. I started losing sleep, waking up in the middle of the night in cold sweats. The silence of the house that once felt comforting now pressed down on me like a weight. I'd walk past the framed photos of my grandparents and feel guilty, like I was failing them already. The family didn't just stop at court filings. My phone lit up with blocked calls, messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Greedy bastard. This ends with you broke and alone. Sometimes I'd swear I saw their cars parked just beyond the trees, headlights off, watching. Maybe it was paranoia, maybe not. One night, after another round of paperwork and sleepless hours, I found myself sitting on the back steps, staring into the dark yard. For the first time, the thought crossed my mind. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm not built for this. The pressure, the isolation, it gnawed at me. I wasn't a fighter. I wasn't a businessman. I was just the kid they always ignored, suddenly holding a fortune everyone wanted. And the weight of it felt unbearable. I buried my face in my hands, my chest tight. For the first time since it all began, I actually thought about giving up, walking into the next hearing and saying, take it. Take it all. Just leave me alone. That was my lowest point, my darkest moment. But then I remembered the letter. My grandfather's handwriting, steady and firm. Protect what is yours. We trusted you because you never let greed guide your heart. I lifted my head, tears stinging my eyes. Daniel's voice echoed in my mind too. They think you'll fold. Prove them wrong. I took a long breath. My hands still shook. My fear didn't vanish, but a spark of something steadier began to form. If I walked away now, I'd be proving them right. If I fought, even terrified, even unsure, I'd be proving my grandparents right. And that's when I realized what I had to do to end this once and for all. The courthouse smelled of old paper and nerves. I sat at the long wooden table, my palms slick against the polished surface. Across from me, my father and uncle sat with their lawyers, smug in their pressed suits. My aunt whispered furiously to one of my cousins, who smirked as if the outcome was already written. Daniel sat beside me, calm as ever, flipping through the files he'd prepared. "Remember," he murmured, "they thrive on intimidation. You don't have to outshout them. Just stand firm. Truth is already on your side." When the judge entered, the room went still. The trial began, and their lawyer launched first. He painted a picture of manipulation, of a grandson who took advantage of two elderly people in declining health. He used words like unfit, untrustworthy, self-serving. Every syllable felt like a nail hammered into me. I kept my eyes down, hands trembling under the table. But then Daniel stood. His voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. Calm, deliberate, undeniable. "Your Honor, my client's accusations rest on one assumption: that Mr. Cole could manipulate two of the most meticulous, strong-willed people I've ever known. Let us instead examine the facts." He opened the first binder. Bank statements, property records, medical evaluations. He laid them out one by one, methodical, like a surgeon exposing the truth. 6 months before their deaths, Mr. and Mrs. Cole revised their will. Not once, but twice. Both times under the supervision of two independent attorneys, both of whom certified their mental clarity. "Both attorneys are here to testify." The opposing lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Daniel didn't stop. He pulled another set of papers. "Now, regarding the claim of undue influence, Mr. Cole's grandparents also established trust protections. They anticipated exactly this scenario and included clauses ensuring their estate could not be mismanaged by anyone outside their chosen heir. Furthermore," he turned, his eyes locking on my father, "we have financial documents showing that several family members are currently in significant debt. Gambling losses, unpaid loans, and in one case," he tapped the paper for emphasis, "embezzlement from a previous employer." The courtroom gasped. My father's face went red, my uncle paled, and my cousin's smirk evaporated. Daniel pressed forward, relentless. "This isn't about an unfit heir. This is about greed, about desperation, about family members who see inheritance not as a legacy, but as a lifeline for their own mistakes." He let the silence hang. The judge scribbled notes, expression unreadable. When my turn finally came to speak, my knees nearly buckled as I walked to the stand. But I remembered Daniel's words. "Stand firm. Truth is on your side." I told the court about Sundays on the porch, about my grandparents teaching me values, not investments, about how I never asked for money, never expected it, never even wanted it. "The only thing I wanted," I said, voice cracking but steady, "was to honor them. And the only way I can do that is by protecting what they entrusted to me. Not because it's $25 million, but because it's their life's work, their story, their faith in me." When I finished, the courtroom was silent. For once, my family had no interruptions, no mockery, just silence. The judge leaned forward, folding her hands. "The will stands. Contest dismissed." My breath rushed out of me, relief flooding my chest. Daniel nodded once, calm but satisfied. I turned to see my father's expression, shock giving way to fury, his fists clenched, his lips pulled tight. My aunt's eyes brimmed with angry tears. My cousin muttered curses under his breath. They looked small, suddenly, defeated. As I walked out of that courtroom, Daniel by my side, I caught a glimpse of their faces one last time. Pale, tight with rage, hollowed by the weight of losing. And for the first time since the crash, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like someone my grandparents would have been proud of. But victory in court was only the beginning. The real question was what I'd do with the legacy they left behind.